We're going to be looking at, again, equations in standard form, which everything is on one side and an equal sign is on the zero. So the x term, the y term, and the constant term are on one side, equal zeros on the other. Sometimes with standard form, you'll just have the x squared and the y squared on one side, and the constant term will be on the right. In the rearranging lesson, you looked at a way of taking this standard form and rearranging it into y equals mx plus b form so that you can graph it. What we're going to show you here is a way that you could graph this without having to rearrange it. And that is graphing using the x and the y intercepts. So what you want to remember is an x-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the x-axis, which is this line right here. And if a point is on that line, if the x-intercept is on that line, that means the y-coordinate is 0. So to solve for the x-intercept, if the y-coordinate has to be 0, you can substitute that point in and solve the equation for x. So this is how you would do it. First of all, you would take the y term and you would substitute 0 in for y. So you would have the negative 6x plus 2, and you would substitute 0 in for y, and then minus 18 equals 0. Now 2 times 0 is 0. So you would write this as negative 6x minus 18 equals 0. And solve that equation for x. So the first thing to do to solve the equation for x would be to add 18 to both sides. And that would give you negative 6x equals positive 18. And then divide both sides by negative 6. Leaving you with x equals, and then 18 over negative 6 is negative 3. Now, since that is an x-intercept, you write it as a coordinate. That would be negative 3 for the x, and the 0 coordinate would be 0. And then what you would do is you would plot that negative 3 on the x-axis. Again, on the x-axis, there's your negative 3. Now we're going to do the same for the y-intercept. The y-intercept now is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. This is the y-axis here. At this point, the x-coordinate is 0. So in this case, you're going to substitute 0 in for x and solve for y. So now substitute 0 in for x. So that means we have negative 6 times 0 plus 2y minus 18 equals 0. And since negative 6 times 0 is 0, we just have positive 2y minus 18 equals 0. And now what we're going to do is add 18 to both sides. And that will give us 2y equals 18. And lastly, divide both sides by 2. And that leaves you with y equals 9. So once again, because it is a y-intercept, that means the x-coordinate is 0 and the y-coordinate is 9. So on the y-axis, up here, the y-coordinate is 9. Now what you have to remember is that these are two separate points. The x being -3 and the y being 9 does not mean you plot a point at -3, 9. These are two separate points. So the -3 is the x-axis, x-intercept, and it's 1 point on the x-axis. And the 9 is a second point, and it goes on the y-axis. And then now what you do is you join those 2 points to make a line. Make sure you use a ruler and make sure your line goes all the way from end to end. You can put arrows on the ends, but if you bring your line all the way to the edges of the grid, it does have an indication that the line keeps going. So this gives you a way to graph a line when the equation is given to you in standard form without having to rearrange.